In the previous installment of this video, we discussed the most famous signature moves by some of the best players in NBA history, like Jordan's fadeaway or Kareem's skyhook. Unfortunately, some legendary signature moves didn't make the cut, so we decided to go again. Without further ado, here are the greatest signature moves in NBA history, Part 2. Carmelo Anthony, jab step jumper. If you love basketball, you must love Carmelo Anthony's jab step jumper from the mid-range. Standing at 6'8", strong as a bull, with a silky jumper and a deceptively quick first step, Melo was a nightmare for opposing guards. Melo's office was either left or right elbow, and he'd go to work from there. The order of business was to score most of the time, as he was never a first-class passer, but boy could he fill it up. Melo would plant his feet, turn around, and then use his jab step as a precursor to his next move. If the defender stood too close to him, Anthony would go by and keep the defender at his hip. If he didn't bite on the jab step, Melo would raise up and release one of the prettiest jump shots in NBA history. He'll never win a title as the first or even the second option, but he's a first ballot Hall of Famer, and I'm thrilled he's playing NBA basketball again. Hashtag stay Melo. Magic Johnson, no look pass. By the end of the 70s, the NBA desperately needed a star and a little bit of magic to attract declining viewership. With Gervin Johnson, a 6'9" point guard who played the game unlike anybody before, the league got the magic it needed. Magic had an infectious smile that shined bright like the LA lights, and the game that was worthy of Hollywood stars, who started to fill the front rows to see the Lake Show. Showtime Lakers became one of the most fun and most successful teams ever, with 5 titles and 3 more finals appearances. Magic played basketball from the future and could do everything on the court, and even though he was a more than capable scorer, most of his best highlights are his passes because it seemed like he's got eyes in the back of his head. No-look passes were Magic's favorite, and when he'd hit a teammate going full speed looking in one direction and delivering the ball perfectly in another, the crowd would go crazy and kept coming for more. LeBron James, the chase down block. LeBron James has scored over 30,000 career points, and soon he will reach 10,000 assists and rebounds, making him the only player with these types of numbers. However, when we are talking about LeBron James and the play that stands above all others, it's not one of his 5 buzzer beaters in the playoffs or some fancy no-look assists. It's that chase down block on Andre Iguodala during the 2016 NBA Finals. Even though it was not a game-winning play, that block was a huge momentum shifter, and it kept the game in Cleveland's hands, which would ultimately be decided by the most famous play of Kyrie Irving's career. LeBron has always been a spectacular athlete, and nobody at that size and weight could move as fast as LeBron, which the play on Iguodala perfectly illustrated. But his block on Iggy wasn't first of its kind, and Bron has been blocking shots like this since his rookie season. King James mastered the art of the chase down block, which is a combination of basketball IQ and a sense of timing, willingness to go full throttle and sprint back on defense, and supreme athleticism. And when a 6'8", 270-pound human runs faster than everybody and then swats that thing into the crowd or pins it off the backboard, it's one of the most spectacular things you can see in basketball. Rajon Rondo, behind the back fake. Rajon Rondo's legacy is somewhat diminished in recent years, as he bounced around the NBA quite a lot in the last 5 to 6 years, with results that were not so great. However, when Rajon Rondo was wearing the Celtics green, he was a 4-time All-Star and in the discussion for the best point guard in the game. Rondo was drafted by the Celtics in 2006, and in 2008, he won the title alongside Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, and Paul Pierce. As they got older, Rondo's role on the team grew, and the Big Three soon became the Big Four. Standing at 6'1", but with a 7'47" wingspan of 6'9" and enormous hands, he was a tenacious defender who made 4 all-defensive teams. On offense, he was the brain of the Celtics, who led the league in assists and scored when he needed to. Even though Rondo's Jimbo was basically non-existent, he used his smarts to get to the rim for an easy basket. One of his favorite moves was to penetrate to the paint, then fake the behind-the-back pass and lay it in. Because Rondo was an elite passer, defenders would often bite on it and leave the cup unprotected, making this move very effective. Kevin Durant, Hesi PullUp Jimbo. Only hardcore NBA fans will know the term Hesi Jimbo. For public consumption, it was coined by Kevin Durant himself when he described the game of Markelle Fultz on Twitter, of course, in 2017. Back then, Markelle was a collegiate phenom and didn't yet suffer from a thoracic outlet syndrome, and his jumper was smooth like butter. Durant and Fultz both grew up in Prince George County in Maryland, and Durant was describing how he learned the Hesi PullUp Jimbo from the same guy he learned it. Translated, Hesi means hesitation, and Jimbo or a Jimmy is slang for a jumper. And when it comes to hesitation pull-up jumper, there is none more deadly than Kevin Durant's. It's extremely difficult to run with the basketball, then stop on a dime, contort your body correctly, and then hit a long-range shot. However, KD is not called easy money sniper for no reason. He hit the exact same Hesi pull-up Jimbo from 28 feet in 2 consecutive NBA Finals that won him 2 Finals MVPs. In 2017, he gave the Warriors a crucial lead with the pull-up 3 in the final minute of the pivotal Game 4. Next year, he hit the dagger again from almost the same exact spot, killing Cleveland's title hopes once again. Standing at 7 feet, with the skills of a guard and with a feathery shooting touch, KD's pull-up Jimbo is one of the most unstoppable signature moves in basketball history. Jamal Crawford, shake and bake. Jamal Crawford was the playground king, and it didn't change his game much when he came to the league. Jamal isn't a particularly strong or tall guy, and he isn't a big leaper either. He kills you softly with his dribble, and his highlights look somewhat like the And One mixtapes from the early 2000s. Crawford had one of the most spectacular handles in NBA history, and with a jump shot to match it, he could score in bunches when he'd get hot, and he'd get hot often. His shake and bake dribble drove defenders insane and brought crowds to their feet. Crawford is one of 4 players to score 50 with 3 different teams, and his scoring prowess won him 2 Sixth Man of the Year awards. A true hopper at heart, Jay Crossover still doesn't plan to retire at the age of 40, and I'm hopeful he dances and shuffles for at least 1 more year. Tony Parker, teardrop floater. Tony Parker came to the NBA as a speed demon who could handle the rock, but who couldn't shoot it that well and who lacked the touch around the basket. The latter would significantly improve with time, so much so that Parker became one of the best finishers in the paint, despite a small frame and unimpressive wingspan. What set the Frenchman apart was his ever-expanding toolbox of spins, hesitation moves, and quick direction changes that would free him up to launch a shot. And the pinnacle of those shots was the floater, which looked like poetry in motion. A floater is often described as one of the most difficult shots in basketball due to the fact that a player must set off 1 foot and shoot with 1 hand in a millisecond after the dribble and before it gets blocked. However, when it's done well, it can be one of the best tools for undersized point guards like Tony or Chris Paul, who were the best in the business when it came to slithering through traffic and crafty finishing among the trees. In his prime, Parker was one of the most efficient and clutch point guards in the NBA, and he rarely ever shot threes, with just 1.3 attempts per game, which most centers average in today's game. Tony was old school, and he did most of his damage inside the three-point line, headlined by a teardrop floater that was borderline unstoppable. Wilt Chamberlain, the Dipper Dunk. Wilt Chamberlain was probably the strongest man that ever played in the NBA and one of its most potent offensive weapons. One would think that Wilt was a power scorer, a bruiser who used his strength to move everybody out of his way on the way to the basket, but that was not the case. Wilt was a finesse player, and he had a sophisticated arsenal of moves in his toolbox, and if you look at his highlights, you can see the aforementioned finger roll, hook shots, or layups. Chamberlain used his moves to his detriment, almost, because he could have easily dominated the game with sheer power. He just didn't want to do it. Wilt was extremely mild-natured and thought the game would be too easy and boring if he just dunked the ball, which frankly he should have done and be even more dominant. But I guess it's hard to argue a man that averaged 50 in a season. When he did dunk the ball, he did it just barely touching the rim, and the move got dubbed the Dipper Dunk, and its creator, the Big Dipper. Wilt would catch the ball with his enormous hands, twist them, and almost lay it in the basket, elegantly grazing the rim. If he had a different mentality and put all his weight into his dunks like Shaq, the league would have probably forbidden dunking, because Wilt would have likely broken every rim in the league. George Gervin, finger roll. There are moves that require more skill, like Harden's step back or Hakeem's dream shake, and moves that are more powerful, like Shaq's Black Tornado. However, there are not many moves that looked more pretty than George Gervin's finger roll. This signature move had a certain aesthetic appeal to it, and Gervin made it look so elegant, like he could make that shot in a tuxedo. George Gervin didn't invent the finger roll, he just made it famous. Wilt Chamberlain was the first regular user of the move, but his was always from a short distance, and Wilt used it as a layup. George Gervin used it more as a jump shot, as he sometimes used to go into a shooting motion behind the free throw line, extending his arm and letting the ball roll over his fingers going upwards until it graciously found its way to the bottom of the cup. Gervin used his finger roll as a primary weapon to win 4 scoring titles, which is a feat bested by only Wilt and Jordan. George's 26.2 points per game is the 8th best scoring average ever, and because he played and scored so effortlessly, like he's hardly breaking a sweat, he got nicknamed the Iceman. Dominique Wilkins, Windmill Dunk. Dominique Wilkins is one of the best players that never won an NBA championship. Selected 3rd overall in the 1982 NBA draft, he almost ended up with Magic and the Lakers, who instead opted for James Worthy with the first pick. The Utah Jazz drafted Wilkins, but he refused to play there due to some issues with salary payments for players, and then he got traded to the Hawks. He spent 12 seasons in Atlanta, and to this day, he remains the best player the Hawks have ever had. Standing at 6'8" and with a phenomenal 42-inch wingspan, Neek was a professional scorer with a 26.4-point average in the beautiful Hawks jersey. However, his teams were not equipped to go past the Celtics and the Pistons in the 80s, and Wilkins only has 3 playoff series wins on his resume. Somewhat unfairly, he'll mostly be remembered for his dunking ability and the most beautiful windmill dunk the league had ever seen. Neek was the only player in the league that could dunk like Jordan, and even though he didn't have Mike's 48-inch vertical, he was a little bit taller and heavier, so his dunks had more power. And until LeBron James showed up, Dominique Wilkins had the most powerful and attractive NBA windmill ever, which earned him the nickname Human Highlight Film.